Hello and welcome to the Bucs Banter podcast. I am your host, Collin Haalboom, and I'm excited to be here talking Tampa Bay Buccaneers football as we will be doing all year round here at Bucs Banter. I'm not going to do a long podcast today. I just want to cover some of the potential options that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers will have with their first pick in Thursday's draft. It's Monday, so we're just a few days away. As I've written about and talked about, I actually have an article up on bucsbanter.ca that outlines some of the realistic options that Jason Light and the Buccaneers front office will have in front of them come Thursday's draft. So without further ado, I just want to kind of get into what type of players they might be looking at. And I think it's important to preface that with the fact that, as everyone who's watching this knows, the Buccaneers have brought back all 22 starters from their Super Bowl winning team last year. So the need to address a certain position is non-existent, and that's extremely rare in this day and age. I think they're the first defending champion to return every single starter in the Super Bowl era or something ridiculous. So I'd have to fact check that one, but anyway, so they have tons of options, and all the time, GMs and executives like to claim that, we're gonna stick with the best player available. But in reality, I think it's pretty obvious that often teams are kind of handcuffed by what their needs are. And thankfully, the Bucs don't. They genuinely find themselves in that position where they can address any area of their roster and really focus on taking the best player or the highest player rated on their board. So that's a great advantageous position for them to be in. Gives them lots of options. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through some of the positions that they could potentially address with the 32nd pick in the 2021 NFL Draft. So first of all, let's talk about wide receiver. So obviously Antonio Brown remains unsigned. He's an unrestricted free agent currently. It doesn't seem like the Bucs, Jason Light, are feeling very much pressure at all, nor should they, in terms of retaining Brown's services. I think they're probably, I know they've been trying to. They've been in conversations with Brown's team. With that being said, there doesn't appear to be any progress being made, which has to tell you they're pretty far apart in terms of that number. Thankfully, this is a really strong draft for wide receiver outside of the top three players. So, I mean, in my opinion, and I think most people's, the top three receivers in this draft: Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, and Jamar Chase. And I think Chase is, according to most experts, the number one player in the draft at the wide receiver position. I totally agree with that. I think Jamar Chase is unreal. I think people forget how dominant he was. Let's not forget during LSU's title run with Joe Burrow and Ed Orgeron and that whole squad, that Justin Jefferson was on that team at receiver as well. So yeah, sure, they were stacked. Okay, but Jamar Chase was their best receiver by far. And look at the year Justin Jefferson put together as a rookie for the Minnesota Vikings. So that just kind of gives you a glimpse of just how talented Jamar Chase is. But I don't want to spend too much time talking about all the top prospects because the Bucs are picking at 32. They're in that position as defending champs. So there is no chance in hell any one of those three receivers is going to be available. I don't think they make it out of the first 15 picks, but we will see. In terms of some players I think could come in and help the Buccaneers right away and just would be great to have some weapons at the receiver position locked up on a rookie deal. Who knows? Godwin's going to be unrestricted next year. Of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the presence of Tyler Johnson and Scotty Miller. Those guys showed a ton of promise. Scotty Miller especially, given a little more opportunity. And Tyler Johnson had some huge catches in the postseason as well. And he's someone that Bruce Arians and Byron Leftwich and the rest of that Buccaneer coaching staff is very fond of, and with good reason. That being said, if AB doesn't come back, I think having a stockpile of talented wideouts is never an issue. So the first guy I want to spotlight here is Kadarius Toney out of Florida. Toney's not the hugest type of player. he's not the biggest guy. He's around 6 foot, but he is an absolute burner. First team all SEC receiver. He racked up 70 receptions, 984 yards, and 10 touchdowns this past season. I love his game. I see his skills translating really well to the next level. Just an absolute lightning bolt with the ball, yards after the catch, an electrifying player. I'm sure many of you have seen plenty of Kadarius Toney. You know, the Bucs being in Florida, lots of Gator fans hopefully are listening to this. And I think the combination of him and Pitts was lethal and likely elevated Kyle Trask's status even entering this draft. I think now that GMs and executives and even just media analysts alike have had the chance to kind of break him down, I think there was a point during the NCAA season where he was considered a first rounder for sure, just because of the production. But what I'm getting at is I think that the majority of that production was more a result of having players as skilled as Kadarius Toney and Kyle Pitts. So anyway, he could come in, he could play the slot, he could play out wide. You can hand him the ball. He took a ton of handouts. Toney was actually a high school quarterback, played a bit of quarterback in college even. And he's a really fun player, incredibly elusive, and just a legitimate threat to score a touchdown at any moment. It's the type of guy I would love to see in pewter and red. And if he's there at 32, which I don't necessarily see as a likely scenario, but if he is there, he's someone I'd be very excited about. Toney is definitely my number 4 receiver behind the aforementioned Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, and Devontae Smith. Another guy who's been mocked to the Bucs quite frequently is Elijah Moore out of Mississippi. He's smaller than Toney, but he's faster and every bit as electrifying with the ball. He was incredibly productive as well. He had 86 receptions and just under 1,200 receiving yards to go with his 8 touchdowns on the year. So for Ole Miss. So let's compare. If it wasn't for Devontae Smith, Elijah Moore is hands down the most productive wide receiver in receptions and yards, second in both those categories. So clearly an incredibly productive player. He averaged 150 yards per game, and he was a first-team All-American. So he's not short of accolades after this past season. A little bit undersized, but again, similar to Toney's profile in that he's kind of like that gadget receiver. And I think Byron Leftwich and Bruce Arians, with his offensive resume, would love to get their hands on players like these two, either one of them, if they were to be there at 32. But again, that's just my opinion, because if we look at Jason Light's history, he prefers bigger receivers, right? I mean, aside from Scotty Miller, Tyler Johnson, Godwin, Evans, those are all big receivers. So there are some other options, and it's totally possible that, they have someone like Terrace Marshall Jr. out of LSU higher on their board, or Rashad Bateman out of Minnesota. Another smaller guy I like is Rondale Moore out of Purdue. He is a incredible athlete. His testing scores are off the charts. But yeah, between both Moores, Rondale Moore, Elijah Moore, Kadarius Toney, these are sub 4.4 guys, so absolute burners. Whereas Rashad Bateman, Terrace Marshall Jr., those are more like, I don't want to call them possession receivers, but they're a little more of your prototypical wide receiver build and style of play. So that's 5 players right there, if the Bucs were to go wide receiver, who I think have a good chance between the 5 of them, a couple of them being available at 32. Whether or not that's of interest to Jason Light and his staff, we don't know. We'll have to see. I'm going to stick with the skill positions at the moment and just address running back. You may be, a lot of people probably wondering, saying there's no chance the Bucs draft a running back. Tampa just signed Giovanni Bernard, which is a great signing, by the way. I can't imagine any Bucs fan or follower of the team who wouldn't be ecstatic about bringing in Bernard. Love Rojo, love playoff Leonard Fournette, but they are totally like ground and pound running backs. Whereas, and Fournette did a very admirable job in the postseason of stepping up, and he caught enough balls to get the job done. But anyone who's watched, the Bucs games all season leading up to that. Those two are both far from adequate as receivers out of the backfield. And I mean, we all know Tom Brady loves that. He loves a dump down, third down back, someone with hands. So Giovanni Bernard will step in and fill that role beautifully. It's a wonderful tandem they have. That being said, all three of those running backs are free agents after this season. So is it really that far-fetched? Let's say a Travis Etienne, Javonte Williams, or Najee Harris is available at 32. I definitely think one of those three would be available, but there's a good chance two of them go in the first before the Bucs pick. But it's not that unbelievable to think, you could invest in the future. You're going to have a back for 4, potentially 5 years moving forward. You could even use them this year. So those three running backs I mentioned, I mean, Travis Etienne is my favorite. I'm a bit of a sucker for the flashiness he offers, the big play potential. His 40 time was only 4 in the 4.4s, but I swear, like, he's faster than that. His game speed is way faster than that. He flies. He is a threat to take it to the house any single time. And again, I'm kind of just perusing through the article that I've written up at bucsbanter.ca. So if you want to, feel free to head over there and check it out. But where I go into more detail about each of these players. But as I'm just scrolling through here, I'm just picking up on some of the stuff I'd written down. So in terms of Etienne's production, he's the all-time rushing leader in the ACC. 46 total games with a touchdown in his college career, which is most in college football history. He accounted for 70 rushing touchdowns over the course of his career at Clemson. But again, it's not just his production. It's just that threat of a home run anytime. Like, I could see him. Some have compared him to like Reggie Bush. Like, yeah, he's that kind of exciting player. He's a one cut and go type of guy. He's not going to dance around. He's going to make one hard cut and just smash the hole. And if he gets through, good night. So I would love Travis Etienne. I would also love to if Najee Harris somehow slipped. But again, I expect Etienne and Harris to be gobbled up in the first round as we've gotten closer to draft day. Most people believe that those two will be taken. I think the Jets at 23, Steelers at 24, you got the potential for those two to go back to back. I could even see the Dolphins. I believe their second pick is 16th overall. I could see them, picking up one of these guys just to have that. Najee Harris is like a pure 3-down back, just an absolute stud. Doak Walker Award winner, nation's best running back this past season. He set all-time touchdown records at Bama, total touchdowns 57, as well as the all-time rushing yards, just 250 yards under 4,000 and 46 rushing touchdowns. So when you're setting those kind of records in those categories as a running back at the University of Alabama, you're doing something right. So also important caveat to note is he accomplished that without starting a game in his first 2 seasons. So yeah, he played 4 technically. He's coming out as a senior after he returned, as did Etienne this past year unexpectedly. But just think about that kind of production, only playing 2 seasons with the ball in his hand. It's really incredible. He's a tough, hard-nosed runner, always finishes runs. And he really improved as a pass catcher, as a receiver, and a route runner for that matter. He had 43 receptions for 425 yards and 4 touchdowns, so serviceable. Etienne's a better receiver. But again, since I've written this article and as we're getting closer here, I don't expect either one of those guys to be available, to be honest. I think they're going to go 1-2 in terms of running backs in the draft. I would assume Najee Harris will go first, then Travis Etienne. Javonte Williams out of North Carolina. I know that Thor Nystrom, not for Yahoo, he's with Yahoo now. He does a great job, does like a top 500 prospects article. I just saw that he has Javonte Williams number 1, compares him to Nick Chubb. So who knows, right? It all depends how these personnel executives value these running backs according to their grades. And maybe Javonte Williams goes first. I mean, crazier things have happened. But Javonte Williams, I mean, for 3 running backs to go before the Bucs pick in the first round is unlikely, just with the trend of, running backs and the value of the running back. I mean, look how much it's changed over the last 5 years. It's become completely undervalued. Most teams want to just ride a guy off his rookie deal, and then they're willing to move on just because of the pounding that these running backs take. So Javonte Williams would be another option that I know a lot of people in Bucs Nation would be excited about. Again, that's if a running back is something that you're not opposed to. In terms of the secondary, our secondary has showed a ton of promise, especially the second half of last season and all through the playoffs. Super impressive group. In terms of the safety position, Jordan Whitehead, Mike Edwards, and of course, Antoine Winfield Jr. I mean, I love that trio of safeties. So I don't really see us going with a safety. But in terms of cornerback, I mean, Carlton Davis is going to be due for a new deal. And if he plays anything like he has this past season, he's going to be due for a big deal. He's going to command a lot of money. You never know. I would hate to see Carlton Davis leave Tampa, but we shall see. And we've heard Jason Light and Todd Bowles previous years, especially when they drafted all these corners within the last 3 years. We've heard them say you can never have enough corners. You can never have enough corners. I've heard it a bunch of times. So who knows? Maybe someone like Asante Samuel Jr. out of Florida State, small guy, 5'10", which again does not fit the profile that Jason Light has shown in the past in terms of what he favors. He likes long corners, long, fast corners. But Samuel is totally a first-round talent, and he's a little bulldog, and he's a ball hawk, and he's got all the instincts. Of course, his father was a 4-time Pro Bowler in the NFL and a Super Bowl winner. So if Asante Samuel Jr. is available, I mean, that's intriguing. He had 3 picks in only 8 games this past season. A little too aggressive at times with his hands when he's engaged with receivers, and I think could draw a lot of flags at the next level. But shit, like a good cornerback is going to get flagged here and there, right? You'd rather than be aggressive than be too soft, like a cough, Vernon Hargraves or something like that, where he's playing 20 yards off the line. Another guy out of Northwestern, Greg Newsome, the second. Compared to Samuel, Newsome was less productive. He missed a lot of games. He had some injury concerns. However, he fits the physical profile that Jason Light tends to favor. So he's 6 foot, 190. He ran a 4.38 in the 40. Samuel ran a 4.45. So Newsome's bigger, he's faster, and those are definitely some of the traits that the Bucs have leaned towards in the past. He's a really well-rounded player, so I wouldn't say that Newsome is an absolute star in any one area. Didn't have any picks last year, but he did have a bunch of pass breakups. But he's really technically sound and capable in every area. And I think when we're talking DBs and corners especially, that's the type of player that you like to have at that position. I compare it to Brandon Roy in basketball. He was always, what is it? Jack of all trades, master of none. He's that type of player. So, and he certainly has a high ceiling. Again, a lot of mocks though have Newsome getting scooped up in the 20s somewhere, but there's totally a chance he could be available. It looks like Asante Samuel Jr. will be available if anyone's mock drafts have any semblance of real information behind them. Who knows? But that's just something to keep note of. Another guy, Caleb Farley out of Virginia Tech. Farley. Let's call him Caleb Farley in honor of Chris Farley. We'll just pronounce his name that way. Super talented, really, really talented player. But he recently had back surgery. So he I can't recall if he opted out or his injury forced him to miss this past season. I think it was an opt-out. But anyway, he is a super talented cornerback, and we'll see what the medicals say when these teams get their hands on him. But if he were to slip, that'd be fantastic. I didn't write very much about Caleb Farley just because I don't expect him to be there. And then another guy is Eric Stokes out of Georgia. He ran a blazing 40 time in the 4.2s, I think. Yeah, probably more likely to be a second round talent, but I figured I would throw him into the mix as a potential option for the Bucs. So to summarize, Eric Stokes, Caleb Farley, Greg Newsome, and Asante Samuel are 4 corners who I could see potentially at least 1, 2, couple of them, maybe all of them, being available at 32 for the Bucs. Now, in terms of the defensive line prospects in this 2021 NFL draft, it is an unimpressive group. It is a very underwhelming group. Jason Light said as much in his most recent press conference, and that's been a pretty unanimous stance. But to hear general manager come out and critique an entire positional group is in my opinion, that's saying something. So the thing is, the Bucs, if there was a position that they needed most, it would be edge rusher, in my opinion. I think Jason Pierre-Paul, he was banged up. He was barely practicing all last year. I think he got his knee cleaned out a bit, and he's been a warrior. He's been fantastic. We obviously just re-signed Shaq Barrett, which is wicked. However, similar to corner, you can't have enough. And to have a rookie come in with a lot of talent and be a rotational piece, and then potentially someone who you can coach up, who knows what they could become. So I think some of these like ultra athletic, unproven defensive ends could potentially be in play for the Bucs at the end of the first round. Jason Owe out of Penn State, he similar to Newsome in the sense that he didn't have any sacks this past year. He only played 7 games. COVID obviously screwed things up, but he is an animal. He's a beast. 6'5", 260, jumped hair under 40 inches in his vertical testing. And get this, he ran a 4.36 40-yard dash, which is utterly ridiculous. So bit of a project, all the physical gifts in the world, underwhelming production. But that's a guy who would be fun to mold. And you got to think that learning from the Bucs D linemen, especially their edge rushers, Shaq Barrett and JPP, could go a long way towards aiding that player's development. And the same scenario would be in play for Joe Tryon out of Washington. He's another opt-out guy due to COVID. He's declaring for the draft as a junior. So he really only has 2 seasons under his belt playing at Washington. But he was very productive as a sophomore. 8 sacks, 12.5 tackles for loss in 13 games played. Second team All Pac-12. And again, great size, 6'5", 260. He ran a 4.64, which is also incredibly fast, jumped 35 inches. So, I mean, he's a hair below OA if you consider the physical testing and size, but he's right up there with a little more production in his last season from a statistical perspective. So another versatile prospect, same deal. Those two can really be grouped together. All depends who Jason Light and his staff like more. Gregory Rousseau out of Miami. He also opted out. He's really been sliding in a lot of drafts. And I'm not sure why. These opt-outs seem to potentially be hurting guys. But he's certainly no Jalen Phillips, the other edge from Miami, who I don't expect to be available. And then the other guy I did not profile is Azeez Ojulari, who's an edge rusher out of Georgia, 6'3", 240. Hell of a player. If Azeez Ojulari was available at 32, I think the Bucs would run to the table or the phone and call that pick in because he'd be phenomenal. I just don't see him being there. And the last positional group that I think could potentially be in play for the Buccaneers with the 32nd pick is an interior offensive lineman. I can't see him touching a tackle. They just re-signed Donovan Smith, who is a player who has proven to be so much more consistent of late, and I think showing some real promise, and he's incredibly durable. He never misses games. So I'm good with the Donovan Smith move. I got some buddies who one buddy in particular who's not really a fan, but I'm past that point. I'm willing to move move beyond criticizing Donovan Smith. I was really pleased with how he played last season, especially throughout the playoffs. He handled some serious pass rushers, shut down Chase Young. But again, we're talking draft, so I got to stay focused, not talk too much about our current team. But the reason I do think an interior offensive lineman is in play is Alex Kappa and Ryan Jensen are both set to become free agents. So Alex Kappa, of course, the right guard, his rookie deal is coming to an end. He missed the playoffs last year with a broken leg. And Aaron Stinney, guy off like the practice squad, had never even started an NFL game, came in for the playoffs and filled in quite admirably. And then the Bucs' beloved center, Ryan Jensen, I'm hopeful we can bring him back, that's for sure, because he brings a mean edge to this team. And it's just so nice to have an offensive line as a Bucs fan that you have confidence in. And that was the most refreshing thing. 25 years as a fan of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I've never felt so good about our offensive line. And what do you know? We go ahead and win the Super Bowl. So just speaks to the importance of the trenches. And anyway, so Kappa going down, we also signed Aaron Stinney, the one who filled in for Kappa. So that's nice, but I just don't see him as a starter long term. So I imagine we're going to have trouble re-signing Alex Kappa. That's something that Scott Reynolds and John Laddier have talked about at length at the Pewter Report. If you haven't listened to our Pewter Nation podcast, Pewter Report, that's something you should check out. Those guys do great work. Anyway, Landon Dickerson from Alabama. He's a bit of a beast. He was playing at Bama. He missed the college football playoff. Unfortunately, he tore up his knee, and he's dealt with some injuries. He was initially a highly rated tackle who committed to Florida State, but transferred after an injury, went to Bama. Saban pushed him inside where he was initially a guard his first year at Bama. And then they switched him over to center, and he was the best center in the country this past season. Team captain, and just the versatility of being able to play guard or center is huge. So he was an All-American, won the Remington Trophy, given to the best center in the country. Similar to Ryan Jensen, he has a bit of that mean streak, and he's a guy who just kind of fits that makeup that Jason Light loves in his offensive lineman. He's a vocal leader. He's mean on the field. And I think if Landon Dickerson is there at 32, he's really the only interior offensive lineman I would consider who I think will be there. So, yeah, I think that is all the players that I profiled in my article for bucsbanter.ca. Some receivers, couple running backs, some edge rushers, and an interior offensive lineman. I think it could be someone else. Who knows? That's the beauty of the position the Bucs are in currently in this draft. I mean, again, I wrote about it, but every GM wants to have the 32nd pick because that means they won the damn ship. And that's a position Jason Light and the Buccaneers are sitting in right now. And they can watch the whole first round play out. They could move back. I mean, if they love the guy, they could move up. I expect that to be highly improbable. I could totally see them moving back to acquire some extra picks. Be amazing if they could scoop an extra third or even a second. Who knows? And just kind of accumulate some additional assets. The old Jimmy Johnson philosophy in Dallas. He said he wasn't smarter than anyone else, so he figured it made sense to give himself as many chances as he could at selecting a good player. So, so those are the players who really jump out at me in terms of being potential guys who Jason Light and his staff could have their eyes on. We will see come Thursday night. I'm really excited. We're going to do tomorrow. I'm going to record an episode with a guest, secret guest. Not a secret, but I'm not going to unveil who my guest is just yet. And I'm going to unveil my mock draft tomorrow. Almost done. Just doing one mock draft. No 1.0, 2.0, none of that shit. Just one mock draft a couple days before. And my guest we're going to go through it, and he's going to help poke some holes in it. We're just going to chop it up and talk about the prospects and the teams and what they might be thinking. It's a really interesting draft. But I'm not even going to get into it right now. I'm going to save all that juicy content for tomorrow. So for now, I just want to say thank you for listening. This was officially the first Bucs Banter podcast episode. We'll be posting this to our YouTube channel as well, which is also Bucs Banter. And make sure you follow us on Twitter at Bucs Banter. Again, I'm Collin Haalboom. Pleasure, and I hope to have your attention again for future episodes. Stay tuned.